The porter and the three ladies. First, a wise and happy king that was the Sherman became a jeweler. His fame spread so that his name was on the lips of every person in Baghdad. His shop was as spacious as a garden, and his jewelry and precious stones as big as ores and fruit. And yet the Sherman remained true to his humble origins and never turned his back on his past. On the contrary, he gathered all his brothers and relatives and gave them jobs in his shop, which they accepted, all except for his younger brother the porter, who refused, saying, "Me in a jewelry shop where the customers are." The nobles, the stuck-up who can barely manage to smile, how would you expect me to live without the clamor of the sulks? Now it happened that one morning this porter was leaning on his basket when a young lady approached him. She was wrapped in a brocade coat, her face hidden beneath a sheer muslin veil. She lifted it and told him in a sweet melodious voice, "Porter, take your basket and follow me." The porter saw her radiant face, which was as beautiful as the dawn, with deep black eyes and thick eyelashes, full smiling lips. He quickly followed the shopper, as delighted to be doing so as if he were entering paradise. And when he noticed her comely girl and her tiny embroidered slippers, he said to himself, "Oh lucky day, oh happy day." The lady stopped at a fruit seller's stall and chose Damascus quinces, Persian pomegranates, apples from Jebel Lebanon, Tarmenta from Egypt, discs from Baalbek, grapes from Hebron, oranges from Yah, and she placed everything in the porter's basket. Next she bought anemones, violets, Damascus lilies, narcissi, and daffodils, pomegranate roses, and stocks, choosing to carry the oars herself. "Porter, take your basket and follow me," she bade the porter in a voice of great charm and coquetance, and he followed her, thanking God and murmuring, "What a lucky day, a day laid with gardenia and jasmine." Next she stopped at another stall and bought Tunisian olives and Moroccan couscous, Nabulsi cheese, Egyptian pickles, and acetrol, pistachios from Aleppo and raisins, Algerian thyme and Yemeni basil and Zanzibar hazelnuts. She placed everything in the basket, and then said again to the porter in the loveliest of voices, "Take your basket and follow me." He followed her, murmuring, "What a day as sweet as honey." She stopped at a nearby grocer's shop and bought rose water, orange blossom water, candles, and Omani incense, musk, saran, cloves, turmeric, and cinnamon sticks. Once more she put everything into the basket, saying, "Porter, take your basket and follow me." He walked behind her, murmuring to himself, "I'll follow this gazelle to the end of the world, even for no reward." When she reached the sweet shop, she stopped and bought kunafa, kadayf, Turkish delight, eat and thanks, baklava, halava, mushbak, sesame rolls, hazelnut rolls, kunafa with cheese. She put everything in the basket and said to the porter, "Porter, take your basket and follow me." He followed, muttering, "What a lucky day." When she stopped at the butcher's and stroked with her lovely hands a lamb which was feeding, the porter said to her, "If you had told me, my good lady, that you were going to buy a lamb, I would have brought with me a mule and carriage." The lady just laughed and went into the butcher's, where she purchased the best meat and wrapped it in banana leaves and placed it in the basket. Next she went to a store with nothing on display in its window, but as she entered, the man behind the counter saw her and quickly handed her a jar of wine. The lady then continued on her way, holding the oars, with the porter following at a respectful distance, murmuring to himself, "How I wish I was even a thorn in the oars she is holding." The lady stopped before a magnificent mansion, adorned with stately pillars and a huge garden laid with trees. She knocked on the door 3 times, and another beautiful, blossoming lady opened the door. For the 3rd time that day, the porter shifted his eyes from the lady who had hired him. The doorkeeper's face was as round as the moon, her breasts like a pair of big pomegranates, and beneath her clothes her tummy was as fat as a page folded in a book. At the sight of this woman, the porter nearly fell down with his basket, but She thought he had collapsed under his heavy load, and so she reproached the shopper, who had rushed inside to put the oars into a vase. "What are you waiting for? Don't you see that this porter is barely able to shoulder his heavy burden?" The porter followed the two women into a spacious room. He was unable to believe his eyes, for the room was decorated with beautiful wooden furniture inlaid with mother of pearl and ivory, and brightly colored cushions, and in the center was a fountain, decorated in blue mosaic as if a piece of the blue sky had fallen into the sitting room. The two ladies began to empty the basket when the porter heard the voice of a third woman calling, "Great, you're back, sister. Welcome." At this the shopper stopped what she was doing and drew back a red silk curtain, and the porter saw a woman reclining on a couch, as beautiful as if she was the shining sun. If she hadn't spoken and then stood up, the porter might have mistaken what he beheld for a painting. Her beauty was intoxicating, huge dark eyes like houri of heaven, with eyelashes so long they nearly touched her eyebrows, and a mouth the color of the rare wild strawberries he sometimes saw in the market. When she smiled, she revealed her teeth, which were like a row of pearls. The porter nearly fell to the oar with his basket when this lady approached. See the goodies her sister had bought. Overwhelmed as he was by her radiant beauty and her amber scent, which aroused all of his five senses, he let out a long sigh. The girls thought he was hurrying them up. The shopper handed him 1 dinar, but the porter remained aged to the spot, and so she asked him, "Why are you still here? Do you think that what I gave you isn't enough?" The third lady, who was the mistress of the house, handed him another dinar, but the porter shook his head and remained standing, reluctant to leave. Finally, the mistress of the house asked him, "Tell us, porter, what's going on?" "Please, I beg of you, ladies," the porter said. "Correct me if I am mistaken, but it seems to me that you live on your own without the presence of a man. Is that so?" "That is correct," the mistress of the house answered. "How can that be when God, being so generous with you three ladies, gave you everything: beauty, new manners, fruit, meat, nuts, and wine? Don't you believe that the happiness and good fortune of women cannot be attained without the company of men? It is certainly the case that a man cannot achieve pleasure without a woman. Remember also, the company of four is always better, as the proverb says, just as a steady table needs 4 legs and not 3. The mistress of the house answered, "Yes, you're right. We live on our own without men. We keep to ourselves because we fear that if we entrust others with our secrets, they will not be kept, and we will suffer as a result. As the poet said, guard your secrets closely when they're told thee. Why, if unable to keep treasures in our own heart, who then can forbid another yours to impart?" The porter said, "I'm just a mere porter, but I assure you, ladies, that I have studied literature and memorized poetry, and above all I have learned the importance of revealing the good and concealing the bad. You may be certain that I am just as the poet described. My secrets are locked in an impenetrable fortress, to which the key has long vanished, and the locks forever tarnished." The three ladies exchanged glances which suggested that they liked and appreciated what they'd heard, and the porter sensed an understanding between them and felt emboldened to say, "Why don't you ladies let me stay with you, not as your companion but as your servant?" The three women again exchanged glances and winks, and the mistress of the house said, "You know well how much we spent to get all these provisions. How can you contribute to our entertainment in return? Don't you know that without gain, love is not worth a grain? If you have nothing, then you must leave with nothing." The doorkeeper added. The shopper intervened, saying, "Stop teasing him. Just listen to me. This porter served me today very well, and he was so patient." The porter took out the 2 diners, telling them, "Please, ladies, take back your money. It is all that I have earned today, but my reward has been to spend time in your company. No, this is your money, and you're welcome to join us." The mistress of the house told him. At this, the shopper laid a table by the fountain, lined with food and drink and beautiful ornamental dishes and cups. She asked everybody to come and sit down, poured herself a drink, and all near it. One to the others, the porter bowed and drank his in one gulp, at which she said to him, "Drink it in good health." The porter took her hand and kissed it and recited, "Share your cup only with those who are beloved and trusted, those pure of heart and full of grace. For wine is delicious when shared with the sweet, but acrid and foul with men of deceit." Then the four continued to drink one cup after another. The porter, who was by now quite tipsy, stood and began to dance like ballet dancers, singing, "Lover, raise your cup and let us frolic. The mazza is tasty and we're lusty. Forget the polo stick and the grassy meadows. I'm not yearning for the call of the sparrowhawk. Ribald revelry fills my mind, and the sound of lips sipping wine." The three ladies giggled and laughed. They had by now lost all of their inhibitions. They danced with him. Then the shopper let her hair down, and it fell to her waist. She took off her outer garment, and in her slip she stepped playfully into the water and splashed. The other three, the porter followed her into the water, and so did the two other girls, and they played together, all chasing each other. The porter hugged and kissed and flirted with the three of them. And Nellie the shopper got out of the water with her wet slip clinging to her breasts. The porter got out too, and she made him sit beside her on the sofa, where she slapped him and bit his ear. The doorkeeper began to fondle his hair and pull it, and the mistress of the house watched him intently with her beautiful eyes, as if she was devouring him. Then the shopper jumped onto his lap. The porter kissed her on the mouth, bit her, and pulled her towards him, pointing between her thighs. She asked him, "Why is this, my love?" "You're con," said the porter. "You have no shame. What is it?" The shopper said, pulling his ears and slapping his neck. "Your womb, your clitoris, your hole, your well, your pussy, your slit, your egg factory." The shopper boxed his ears playfully and then slapped him very hard and told him, "No, no, no." So the porter stood, crying out, "How am I to know what it is? Call when I have never met it before. I beg you, respected and good lady, to introduce me to it." He gazed at her pussy and said, "I am known as the porter. What is your name?" The women laughed until they nearly fell off their chairs, and the mistress of the house laughed the hardest of all. "Pleased to meet you, porter," the shopper answered. "My name is the basil that grows on the bridges." Then the doorkeeper pushed the shopper from the porter's lap and sat down in her place. She pointed between her own thighs and asked, "What is this, my master, my love?" "The basil that grows on the bridges," answered the porter. But the doorkeeper slapped him, saying, "No, no, no." So the porter said to her, "All right, what then is its name?" "The husked sesame," the doorkeeper answered. Then the mistress of the house pushed the doorkeeper from the porter's lap and sat there herself. She pointed between her thighs and asked him, "O light of my eye, what is this?" "The basil that grows on the bridges, the husked sesame," answered the porter. But the mistress of the house slapped and kicked him hard, pinched him on his cheeks, on his chest, and on his arms, saying, "No, no, no." "What is it then?" the porter cried out. "It is the inn of Abu Masrur," the mistress of the house replied. The porter laughed. "The inn of Abu Masrur, but my beautiful ladies, I must tell you about my friend who is dear to my heart just as you are to me now. But he is cold and shivering, and he wishes to rent a room at the inn of Abu Masrur. Have you guessed my friend's name?" He pointed to his prick, and then he squeezed himself between the doorkeeper and the shopper and took the mistress of the house on his lap. The three ladies were pleased that he understood their games and that his disposition seemed to match theirs so well. They showered him with names: the stick, the thing, the pigeon, the panther, the shish kebab, the cock. The porter answered each time, "No, no." No, pinching one woman, kissing another, nibbling at the third. Finally, the three women said all at once, "All right then, you." Genius, what is his name? His name is the Smashing Mule. The three women exclaimed, but we haven't heard of this name before, and we bet you that no one in all of Baghdad has heard of it. Either, what does it mean? The Smashing Mule is the strongest mule, the porter answered. The savage one who grazes on the basil that grows on the bridges, eats the husked sesame with his huge tongue and gallops inside the inn of Abu Masra. The ladies stamped their feet and fell on their backs, laughing. They couldn't believe their luck at meeting this funny, atrocious man. They fed him more food and gave him more to drink. When night fell, the mistress of the house said to the porter, "It is time for you to leave. Go and put on your slippers and show us your beautiful back." The porter sighed in disbelief, saying, "Leave you? Are you asking me to leave my soul behind and die? I have an idea. Why don't the four of us turn night into day, and I promise that tomorrow morning we shall each depart to our own lives." "Let him stay, sister," the shopper said to the mistress of the house. "He is so unique that even if we asked God for a man on the sacred night, when all wishes are granted, we wouldn't be sent one so neat as he." So the mistress of the house agreed, saying to the porter, "You cannot spend the night with us unless you agree that no matter what your eyes may see, your tongue must freeze and not seek explanation, even if your curiosity should become unbearable." The porter readily agreed, saying, "From this second I am dumb and blind." He closed his eyes and began to fondle their breasts, saying, "Why is this that I feel I am blind?" The two girls giggled, but the mistress of the house gestured to a door leading to another room, asking, "Have you read the inscription written there?" He went over and read the words, "Speak not of what concerns you, lest you hear what does not please." And so the porter said solemnly to the ladies, "I pledge that I shall speak not of my concerns." Then the mistress of the house and the doorkeeper sat with the porter while the shopper lit candles and incense, enjoying them. And the four talked and drank wine and fondled one another until they heard a knocking at the door. The doorkeeper jumped up to answer it. After a time she returned, bursting with laughter, and whispered, "Listen, there are three one-eyed dervishes at the door, with their heads shaved and their eyebrows and beards shaved. Oh, each one is blind in the right eye. They claim to have arrived in Baghdad today, and they're looking for somewhere to spend the night. They are prepared to sleep in our garden or the stables." She giggled, adding, "They look so funny, I bet you that they could pull a smile even from a new widow." The three women exchanged looks, and then the mistress of the house said, "Let them in, but on the same condition we made with the porter, that they become a pair of eyes and not tongues." "You mean one eye," said the porter. They all laughed. Then the doorkeeper hurried to fetch the three dervishes. They didn't disappoint, for they were as funny as she had described them. Everybody stood to greet them. The dervishes bowed, saying, "We thank you, for we are indebted to you for your kindness." They looked around them, enchanted with the beauty of the place. They sighed with admiration at the shining candles and the food on the table, and pointed at the fountain in amazement. All of a sudden one of the dervishes saw the porter, who was stretched on the oar, exhausted by all the alcohol and cavorting with the girls. "He may be an Arab, but he is still a dervish like us." Hearing this, the porter stood up. "Stop meddling. Have you forgotten the condition of entering the house? Haven't you read the inscription on the door?" The three dervishes read the inscription, "Speak not of what concerns you, lest you hear what does not please." At this the dervishes said, "We promise, and please be assured that our heads are in your hands, and we ask you to forgive us." The girls laughed and made the dervishes and the porter shake hands. The shopper brought them food and drink, and after they had eaten they thanked the ladies and asked for a tambourine, oud, and Persian harp. The doorkeeper and the shopper brought out instruments, and then the three dervishes tuned them and began to play it, saying. The three ladies joined in with great passion until Their voices rose higher than those of the dervishes and the porter. All of a sudden they heard knocking at the door, and the doorkeeper rushed to see who was there. She returned, saying, "There are 3 merchants from the city of Mosul at the door. They claim that they arrived in Baghdad 10 days ago, and they're staying at the best inn. A fellow merchant invited them to dine at his home, and this merchant sent for musicians and women singers. They all got very drunk and made such a racket that the police raided the house. The 3 merchants ate by jumping over the wall. They ran until they heard our singing. They are terrified to go back to their inn, lest they encounter the police and be thrown in jail for being so inebriated. So they ask whether they can seek refuge here. They look very rich and dignified. One of them even kissed the ground before me." The mistress of the house looked at the other 2 girls and saw the excitement on their faces. "Let them in," she said. The doorkeeper disappeared and returned with the 3 merchants. Everyone in the hall stood to greet them. "We're delighted and happy to have you and welcome you as our guests, but on one condition," the mistress of the house said. "What is your condition, my lady?" one of the merchants asked. The mistress of the house replied, "That you'll not inquire about anything that you see or hear in this house. Speak not of what concerns you, lest you hear what does not please. Be assured that your condition is accepted," one of the merchants replied. Everyone sat down, except for the shopper and the doorkeeper, who rushed to get food and drink, but the 3 merchants did not partake of the wine or the food brought to them. They seemed astonished to see that the dervishes had each lost their right eye, and that they had found themselves in such a magnificent home, belonging to 3 women of such incomparable beauty, charm, eloquence, and generosity, and yet living with the 3 dervishes. The merchants were so entranced by all that they saw that they had not heard the snores of the porter, who was so drunk that he lay on the ground motionless. Soon, when the ladies too were very drunk, the mistress of the house said, "Come, sisters, let us do our duty." The doorkeeper got up, lit more candles, replenished the incense, and cleaned the table, while the shopper went to the porter and woke him, saying, "Get up, lesbians, and lend us a hand." The porter got up, still unsteady on his feet, and asked, "What's up?" He followed the shopper as she moved over to a large closet, inside which were 2 black bitch hounds with chains around their necks. The shopper instructed the porter to lead them to the center of the hall, where everyone was sitting. She rolled up her sleeves and picked up a braided whip. Then she returned to the closet and took out a bag made of yellow silk satin and adorned with tassels. She sat down facing the mistress of the house and took out an oud, which she tuned and began to play, singing along with great passion. "O window of my love, bring me lust upon the breeze." The mistress of the house asked the porter to bring the 2 dogs to her. As soon as the dogs saw her, they shook their heads as if trying to hide and began to whine. But the mistress of the house came down with the whip with heavy blows on the bitches' necks, unmoved by the piteous howling and weeping of the animals. Counting the blows of her whip, the shopper still sang in despair and pain. "O window of my love, bring me lust upon the breeze. If your mother asks for you, I'll hide you in my hair, my warmly woven hair." At this the doorkeeper wailed and shrieked, "Oh, oh," her wails, mingling with the singing, the howling of the dogs, and the mistress of the house counting the strokes as she beat the dogs. The shopper rolled her head against the oud, shaking the instrument on her chest, as if desiring that it would produce melodies akin to the beating of her heart. "O window of my love, bring me lust upon the breeze. If your mother looks for you, I'll hide you beneath my sash, and tie it around my waist." The 3 girls continued with their singing, screaming, beating, shrieking, and wailing. The hearts of the 7 guests were ignited with disgust and curiosity at what they were witnessing. They tried to pretend that everything was neat, all except for one of the merchants, who could not restrain himself and began to whisper to his friends, but the other merchants asked him to be quiet. So the mistress of the house continued beating the dogs, counting the strokes, while the shopper continued to sing, "Oh, window of my love, bring me lust upon the breeze. If your mother looks for you, I'll hide you in my eyes, where pitch black coal resides." As soon as she had finished singing, the doorkeeper, who was sitting facing the shopper, moaned "oh" and then began to scream. She wrapped her hands around her neck, but rather than strangle herself, she tore her dress open from the collar to the hem, threw herself to the ground, and began to convulse, revealing to the mortification of all those present that her body was covered with black, blue, and purple marks, as though she too had been whipped. Like the bitches, the shopper put the wound on the chair and hurried to her, taking rose water to revive her and covering her with her shawl. The mistress of the house stopped beating the dogs when she reached 300 strokes, and she threw the whip onto the floor, kneeled down, and held the quivering dogs in an embrace. Weeping herself, she produced a handkerchief from her pocket, dried the dogs' tears, pleading with them to stop crying. "We're delighted and happy to have you and welcome you as our guests, but on one condition," the mistress of the house said. "What is your condition, my lady?" one of the merchants asked. The mistress of the house replied, "That you will not inquire about anything that you see or hear in this house. Speak not of what concerns you, lest you hear what does not please. Be assured that your condition is accepted," one of the merchants replied. Everyone sat down, except for the shopper and the doorkeeper, who rushed to get food and drink, but the three merchants did not partake of the wine or the food brought to them. They seemed astonished to see that the dervishes had each lost their right eye, and that they had found themselves in such a magnificent home, belonging to three women of such incomparable beauty, charm, eloquence, and generosity, and yet living with the three dervishes. The merchants were so entranced by all that they saw that they had not heard the snores of the porter, who was so drunk that he lay on the ground motionless. Soon, when the ladies too were very drunk, the mistress of the house said, "Come, sisters, let us do our duty." The doorkeeper got up, lit more candles, replenished the incense, and cleaned the table, while the shopper went to the porter and woke him, saying, "Get up, lesbians, and lend us a hand." The porter got up, still unsteady on his feet, and asked, "What's up?" He followed the shopper as she moved over to a large closet, inside which were two black bitch hounds with chains around their necks. The shopper instructed the porter to lead them to the center of the hall, where everyone was sitting. She rolled up her sleeves and picked up a braided whip. Then she returned to the closet and took out a bag made of yellow silk satin and adorned with tassels. She sat down facing the mistress of the house and took out an oud, which she turned and began to play, singing along with great passion, "Oh, window of my love, bring me lust upon the breeze." The mistress of the house asked the porter to bring the two dogs to her. As soon as the dogs saw her, they shook their heads as if trying to hide, and began to whine. But the mistress of the house came down with the whip with heavy blows on the bitches' necks, unmoved by the piteous howling and weeping of the animals. Counting the blows of her whip, the shopper still sang in despair and pain, "Oh, window of my love, bring me lust upon the breeze. If your mother asks for you, I'll hide you in my hair, my warmly woven hair." At this the doorkeeper wailed and shrieked, "Oh," her wails, mingling with the singing, the howling of the dogs, and the mistress of the house counting the strokes as she beat the dogs. The shopper rolled her head against the oud, shaking the instrument on her chest, as if desiring that it would produce melodies akin to the beating of her heart. "Oh, window of my love, bring me lust upon the breeze. If your mother looks for you, I'll hide you beneath my sash, and tie it around my waist." The three girls continued with their singing, screaming, beating, shrieking, and wailing. The hearts of the 7 guests were ignited with disgust and curiosity at what they were witnessing. They tried to pretend that everything was neat, all except for one of the merchants, who couldn't restrain himself and began to whisper to his friends, but the other merchants asked him to be quiet. So the mistress of the house continued beating the dogs, counting the strokes, while the shopper continued to sing, "O window of my love, bring me lust upon the breeze. If your mother looks for you, I'll hide you in mine eyes, where pitch black coal resides." As soon as she had finished singing, the doorkeeper, who was sitting facing the shopper, moaned "oh," and then began to scream. She wrapped her hands around her neck, but rather than strangle herself, she tore her dress open from the collar to the hem, threw herself to the ground, and began to convulse, revealing to the mortification of all those present that her body was covered with black, blue, and purple marks, as though she too had been whipped. Like the bitches, the shopper put the woman on the chair and hurried to her, taking rose water to revive her and covering her with her shawl. The mistress of the house stopped beating the dogs when she reached 300 strokes, and she threw the whip onto the floor, kneeled down, and held the quivering dogs in an embrace. Weeping herself, she produced a handkerchief from her pocket, dried the dogs' tears, pleading with them to stop crying. She kissed them on the head and then gave them to the porter so he could take them back to the closet, and hurried to the doorkeeper, embracing her, wrapping her in her coat, and the three girls wept quietly. Silence fell upon the room, but the expressions of the 7 guests spoke volumes about their revulsion and disgust. The questions gnawed at them. What evil had befallen the doorkeeper's body, and why had the mistress of the house beaten the 2 bitches until they nearly fainted, and yet wept for them, kissed them, and wiped away their tears? The mistress of the house and the shopper helped the doorkeeper to stand and took her to the closet, where they changed her dress. Leaving the 7 men sitting in their seats, the merchant who had spoken before whispered to his friend, who gestured that he should remain silent, pointing to the inscription on the door, but the merchant felt that he could no longer bear what he had witnessed. "Something must be done," he whispered to his friend in anger. "You must remember what we have promised the 3 ladies." His friend replied calmly. But the merchant turned to the dervishes and asked them, "Can you please explain to us what is going on?" One of the dervishes replied, "By God, we came here just a short while before you, and now we wish that we had never set foot in this house and witnessed such heart-rending sights, but instead sought refuge anywhere else, even on the rubbish heap of this great city." Hearing this, the merchant winked at the porter and asked him the same question. "You're asking me? I haven't set eyes on this house before today, although I was born in Baghdad, but I do know one thing that you do not. These ladies live alone, without a man." "Did you say that they live without a man? Then listen to me, all of you," the merchant said. "Since we're 7 men and they are 3 women, let us ask them for an explanation. If they refuse us, then we shall take them by force." The men all agreed, except for one of the other merchants, who protested, "Have you all forgotten that we are their guests, and that we agreed and swore to adhere to their conditions? And who knows why they have chosen to keep to themselves?" But this Fritz merchant was determined to know the truth, and he continued to try to convince the porter that he must eat out what was going on. The mistress of the house, who now with the other girls was behaving as if nothing had happened, became aware of the men arguing and asked, "What is the reason for this clamor? What is the matter?" The porter gathered all of his courage and said, "The gentlemen wish to know why you beat the 2 bitches until you had no strength left, and yet then wept for them, kissed them, wiped away their tears, and they wish to know why the lady tore all her clothes to reveal such terrible marks on her body. Why had she too been flogged with a whip like a man?" Hearing this, the mistress of the house turned to the men. "Is what the porter tells me true?" "Yes," they all replied, all except for the 1 merchant. The mistress of the house's face darkened with rage. "Did you not Agree to ask us nothing? You have wronged us gravely, and yet we, too, are at fault. We were mistaken to have opened our doors to you, and welcomed you." She struck the oar 3 times, crying out, "Come at once!" In no time at all a secret door opened, and 7 black men emerged, waving their swords in their hands. Each quickly seized one of the guests and tied him by the hands, and then the 7 were bound to each other and led to the center of the hall. One of the executioners addressed the mistress of the house, "Our most noble and virtuous lady, shall we behead them this instant?" Hearing this, the porter wailed and wept, pointed at the dervishes, and said, "I am innocent. I don't wish to die because of the mistakes of others." These dervishes were indeed a bad omen. He began to recite, "Great is the mercy of the Almighty, and greatest when bestowed upon the weak. Now upon our bond of undying friendship I implore you, never cast aside an old friend when a new one you seek." Hearing this, the 3 ladies merely giggled, especially the mistress of the house, but she controlled herself and ignored him, saying, "Wait, let me question our guests before you strike all their heads." She addressed the dervishes and the merchants. "Were you not men of power and distinction, you wouldn't have dared to owe us in this way, so tell, who are you?" The merchant whispered to his friend, the reluctant one, "Go ahead and tell her who we are, so that we are not slain by mistake." And his friend answered, "Be patient, I am trying to protect you from the embarrassment of having to plead our integrity." The mistress of the house now turned to the dervishes. "Are you brothers?" she asked. "No, our gracious lady," was their reply. Then she asked them, "Were you each born with 1 eye?" They answered her together, "By God, we were not, our gracious lady. We were each born with 2 eyes, but each of us suffered great misfortune, which left us with only 1. "Are you friends?" the mistress of the house asked. "We met only tonight." "I want each of you to tell your story, explain to us what brought you to our home, and if I am convinced by your tale and feel sympathy, then I shall forgive you and free you," the mistress of the house told the bound men. Then she turned to the executioner, saying, "If not, I shall order you to cut off each man's head." The porter was disposed to tell his story. "Mistress, you know all too well how I came to this house, but you are not aware that I am the brother of a Sherman who until this very year was poor, when God Almighty made him so rich that he became a jeweler, and even Queen Sabida, the wife of the commander of the faithful, Harun al-Rashid, sends her ladies in waiting to purchase for her the most magnificent precious stones, but I refuse to work in my brother's shop, because I so love the hustle and bustle of the market and the people who frequent it, both sellers and buyers, especially if they are women as pretty, sophisticated, and respectable as your sister." He gestured to the shopper. "After she hired me, I followed her with my basket like her shadow, from the fruit and vegetables to the incense and candles, pistachio nuts and sweets. But when she stopped at the butcher's and stroked a lamb on the head, I thought that she was buying him, and so I turned to her and said, 'I wish you'd told me when you'd hired me that you were after a live lamb, so that I might have brought a mule and carriage.'" Everyone in the hall laughed, but the mistress of the house interrupted, saying, "Stroke your head with relief that you still have it, and leave." But the porter said, "But my gracious lady, can I not stay to hear the tales of the others?" "Yes, you may," the mistress of the house told him. She turned to the 3 dervishes and said, "Let us hear your tales, right? You 3 shall decide who will begin." The dervishes looked fearfully from one to the other, as if the task of telling their story was almost as terrifying as facing death itself. After some time, one of them, who looked especially ravaged by fortune, quietly began,
Like, comment, and subscribe.